Okay, and pardon me for just a few moments. I've got to swap out to this account and pop out the chat. And when I got that in position, I will be ready to open up the camera. And there we go. So, anyway, back on Sunday, I had some issues with migraines, and I apologize to any patrons that I was unable to do their sculpt. And I started working on a Tarrasque. Now, it's not intended to look exactly like the artwork in the 5th edition Monster Manual, because I hate it. 5th edition and 3rd edition, the Tarrasques were literally impossible. The shell on the back, going all the way down the tail, is a single hard piece. It's impossible for it to move its back or tail. And yet it's bending. Its anatomy is also annoyed the heck out of me, so I decided I was going to redesign it. I'm going to start with mostly a theropod base, and then go out from there using details that are part of the classic standard Tarrasque, as you know, as we know it in D&D, not as it was used in the actual legend. So, excuse me. What's going to happen today? You know, back on Sunday, I made just the basic raw geometry. Today, we're going to use ZBrush and plenty of references to sculpt out some basic bony landmarks and muscular shapes and masses in order to get our basic geometry before any further detailing. And what's going to happen then is I'm then going to build out the shell, pull out the horns, and other details that are part of the D&D vision of the Tarrasque. Or Tarrasque. No, it's Tarrasque. Sounds more ferocious and menacing as a Tarrasque, as opposed to a Tarrasque. A Tarrasque sounds like some kind of interesting French dessert. So no, it's a Tarrasque. Now, if you are new to the show and you're watching this, you know, on YouTube, don't forget the whole like, subscribe, bell icon, whole 9 yards, so you can know when I'm online. And the Anycubic Photon, it's magic for making miniatures. I swear. So, anyway, I'm going to give it just a few more minutes for some people to show up in the chat. I have it set, you know, the chat's here for me. For some people, it's actually kind of down there if they're doing the, you know, widescreen. But anyway, get some sody pop. And while we're waiting, the primary things we're going to be working on today is getting the actual shape down. Like, for example, I think what I remember of how I did it, I think the arms ended up being a bit small for the way the critter is supposed to be proportioned. And I'm almost certain I've got the direction of the bone at the bottom of the hip from a theropod in the wrong direction and in the wrong spot. But we can fix it in ZBrush. Now, let me go ahead and poke my head into Discord and let people know that I've gone live. Okay, let me go ahead and copy and okay, that should do it. And who do we have that just joined us? Because, you know, wants to see me turn a mass of polygons into a mass of bone and flesh and terror. You know, now that I think about it, the original depiction of the Tarrasque was kind of, the head was almost humanoid, and the body was more like a pot-bellied giant. The new version almost looks like they took a lot of more design cues from Godzilla 98. But we won't. Godzilla 98 had a lot of human anatomy in those hips, in the shoulders, in the arms. The legs were theropodish-ish, but the hips and the arms and the torso was very humanoid. Very primate. We're going to try to keep this a bit more theropodian, maybe add in some therizinosaur-styled anatomy in the shoulders and arms, you know, for those huge grasping talons. In fact, let me see if I can pull up some reference imagery for therizinosaur anatomy. So we go to images.google.com and I type in therizinosaur anatomy. Yes, I did mean Therizinosaurus anatomy. Okay. Somehow, on this particular search, I ended up with a picture of Big Bird with Therizinosaurus talons. That's not cool. No. Okay, pretty much the only major thing I'm seeing here is that the shoulders were kind of down near the bottom center. There's really not much difference from the rest of the theropod general body plan. Okay, so I guess since we're still waiting on people, I'm going to go ahead and jump in to ZBrush. I'm going to do it with my usual snap. And we're going to import. Alright. Tarrasque, Sculpt, Raggio 1.0. It's always a good idea to save iterated versions. Okay, now this is the basic shape that we have. This is very rough, very raw geometry. I'm going to hit X so that we have mirrors. Now one thing that we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the move brush, rather large draw size. I'm going to move the entirety of the upper arm lower on the torso. I'm also going to go ahead and make the arms a little bit longer. because they would be, for the style that the critter is depicted as having. Now I'm going to make the mouse smaller and pull out the hands a bit more, make them a bit larger. Again, because they would be. Now, this is the bone I was talking about that I got wrong. This needs to kind of go backwards and up. And just ever so slightly softened. And then there's one here that comes down and forward, with this in the center being kind of almost flattened. Okay, now for the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to mesh smooth this. We're going to subdivide it a few times. And then we're going to dynamesh it at 128, see what we get. No, the mouth is too... We're going to dynamesh it at 192. Okay. Then we're going to smooth out a couple areas, again, really moderate. Right here. We're going to smooth out the sides and tops of the arm, because these were not round enough. And the bottom, we need them to start round. Now I'm going to grab the front of the knee and pull it forward. We're also then going to grab almost the entirety of the back, because I'd made the calf too short, and the bottom of what's going to be the foot. We need to make this wider, and in this way. Now what's going to happen is we're going to start with body masses. One of the last things we're going to make is the fingers and toes. I'm going to grab here. We're going to come, I'm going to try and flatten it down. And this comes that way, and this comes that way, this comes that way. We're mostly, like I said, right now we're working on getting just the general body masses and shapes in general. Because these things are nasty. Alright, frame out. And here we have our general basic raw geometry figure. We're going to use the clay buildup brush to do most of our work at this point. And I still have only 2 people watching and no one talking. Yay. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with marking out some of the bony landmarks in the body. The head is going to be one of the last things that we do. Alright, so I'm going to pull open some reference images that I have. Okay. And Tarrasque ref pics. Alright. So this is a set of reference images from, for the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Some of the current muscular reconstructions. And here is its skeleton. Now as we can compare, we can see that there are bony landmarks at the top of where this bone meets the chest, at the top of the hip, running pretty wide, and that makes the entire front to back width of the thigh, and then plenty down the phalanges, what would be the pastern on a mammal. And then most of the other bony landmarks would be on the head. So what we're going to do, we right now have the start of the bony landmarks here, but we're going to make sure that we continue it. Oh, for one thing, that's too big. Let's shrink the mouse. For another, it's a little bit too intense. I'm going to smooth out that area. And then kind of come down this way and smooth it out to help get us some of that width of the thigh. So, I said most of our bony landmarks are going to be in the phalanges and in the head, and also possibly in the lower arms. I'd have to look some of the other reference images I've got. The knee gets a little bit of a bony landmarking. Oh. Need to kind of put it more central. We're also going to grab and use the move tool. Kind of move in just a bit. Kind of move the entire knee in just a little bit. And bring that way, and bring the top of this down, and then over. Okay. We're already starting to get a more natural looking leg. Now the next thing that we're going to do is there's a tendon from the muscles that kind of comes up this way on a lot of theropods. And a similar one coming down from where the tail would be. Build up this area in here. We're doing basically what are called masses right now. Excuse me. Yes, it's cold. No, I don't have a cold. Masses are exactly what they sound like they are. They're the larger defining shapes. In this case, the basic musculature and many of the secondary muscles that are large enough and prominent enough to be seen in general shape of the critter. Which in this case is mostly going to be our leg muscles and our torso muscles and our arms. Now I'm going to be undoing some areas in here. And then smoothing it out. Because we need the legs actually going up, in. Now, we need a bit of this right here, a bit of the front thigh coming up. And then we're going to smooth that out. Because our Tarrasque has a bit more oomph than even a T-Rex. Wrong spot. Yeah, let's put it here. Okay, our Tarrasque is nasty. I'm going to smooth that out. You can see the legs are already looking a lot more realistically proportioned or realistically muscled. The bony landmarks on top of the hip and at the front of the knee are taking place. And then these tendons that provide almost like a wing-like, not wing, but a membranous section right there. Let's dig under because we want it to have that membrane look. Now, I will tell you this right now. I am not, I repeat, not going to be doing any details such as scales or spikes on this section. The reason being, this is just the shape. We want to have just the basic details, or basic shapes when we rig. Kind of like the cartoony version without any of the surface detail. That includes the shell, but that's one of the last things that we're going to do because we're going to build it out of the base Tarrasque. Okay. And then the thighs are pretty much shaped. Now the calves, we're going to have some interesting effects with these calves because we're going to have to kind of start with some of the bony lower body bony landmarks as we make them, or lower leg. My brain went meep. I'm going to go ahead and use the term pastern for this lower leg portion, even though it's not really accurate for the metatarsals of a reptile, but just because it's a term that I can use that I think we'll both understand what I mean when I say it. So we're going to come in from beside the joint to come up with these calf muscles, and they're going to attach right there. And then we're going to smooth it a little bit just to kind of get rid of some of the weird shaping that the clay buildup brush gives us. And then we're going to kind of blend them in by kind of bringing them kind of close together here. As you can see, just a little bit of anatomy and our legs look better, a whole lot better. We're also keeping a lot of the lines drawn by this clay buildup because that's the line that the muscles follow. When we draw these muscle shapes on, we want to use these lines to do so. Okay? Same thing would apply with anything else we were doing that had a similar massive musculature. We want to draw in those muscles using the lines in the direction, those muscles go. Now we're gonna not worry about the lower leg just yet. What I'm gonna do now, because I kind of have to, I'm gonna select here. Go down to masking, invert it, and blur a couple times. Then I'm going to go to deformation, offset Z, and stretch out that neck a little. a bit better. Because that neck was just a bit too... Oh, come on. Yeah. The neck was a bit too short. Okay, now with respect to the upper torso. I'm going to increase the intensity of smooth just a little bit, and we're going to smooth flat this area up here. The reason being is because we need to draw on details here that were kind of covered up by this mass. Actually, let's go to standard, stroke, lazy mouse off, intensity down to about 6 Z sub, and let's use this to kind of pull it down. Okay, then we're going to smooth it out. This way we can now draw on the masses that we need on that upper torso. So we go back to clay buildup. And hello, Mark. I see you have some visitors. And we're going to look at our anatomy on this T-Rex. Okay, I'm not real happy with that shape. It's a bit because it's not enough on the actual arm. So we'll go see if we've got, okay, that's an allosaur. That's a bit more like what we're looking for, although, again, we need a larger arm. These are various forms of anatomy for dinosaurs and various images of T-Rex, of the Tarrasque. Alright, so what we have is we've got an overlapping muscle coming from the back top of the neck down almost to the center of the back. Underneath it is the mass of the shoulder blade, and then we've got a secondary mass under it as well, going from attaching point further down the arm and going up. So what we're going to start with is we're going to start with a I'm going to shape out basically where the shoulder blade would be, and that would be up here. And I'm going to smooth it. That's just to give us a guideline. Now, the muscle for the neck. Alright, looking at that picture, the main one attaches before the deltoid. The secondary attaches below the deltoid. So, it's going to attach from here to here. It's going to come all the way back from here. That is roughly where this muscle will attach to and from. We're going to smooth out just a little bit. We want to keep the implications of the shape more than the actual shape. And because this is the Tarrasque, we want it to be even larger than what the drawing we just did would create. So we're going to add on a few more layers of the upper portion of this muscle. And then we're going to smooth it out again, just because we want the implication more than the actual lines, because the lines won't translate well. Okay, we're going to come up pretty high on this portion of the muscle. The reason is because it's got that secondary muscle underneath it. And smooth. Building up the mass up here. And then we're going to kind of come in from here. And then we're going to have the deltoid. It's very similar in shape and position to a hominid deltoid, but it's rotated slightly different. Ours is almost entirely on top. This is somewhat forward. Let me turn that down. Okay. Now, the tricep appears to be split up higher on this style of limb up here, and then further down. I can't see what the interior looks like, but this will give us a nice side view just in general. And then this is the Tarrasque, not a garden variety allosaur. And then it's going to have the one muscle of the bicep coming around like this. And the other kind of coming down. Once again, this is our Arnold Schwarzenegger a beasties. It's got, you know, if it's the Austrian oak, well, this is the Tarrasque. Can't compare to the Tarrasque. And it's going to have, now we don't have a good view on this little diagram of the pectoral muscle, because everything has a pectoral muscle that has arms like this. And they usually come down from where the deltoid meets. And it's more of a flattened, less tubular muscle. And so we're going to kind of combine them. Let's flatten it out a little bit more. And then we're going to come up, build up from here. Flatten. And then just to make sure that it comes from under the deltoid, we're going to make that mass right there. Frame out. Now we're going to kind of add in a bit more mass up here. Not a lot, just a bit, because you know we're going to be having our shell up there, but we want to have the basic anchors in proportion and position. Okay, we need to grab the move tool. I'm going to grab and move up this deltoid because it's too far up. And then we're going to kind of smooth out in there just a little bit. All right. Now the next thing is we now have to shrink this right here. And now we've got to put in what would be the trapezoids. Or is it lats? I keep forgetting which one's which, but we need to pull in the muscle by the side of the head. And it's going to come down from here. It's going to smooth out just a little bit. The muscle inside of the neck, and then muscle coming from on top of the head. This is one that won't be covered by our upcoming shell, so we need to make sure we get it in position, then we can worry about it later. Okay. Now, let's add in just a little bit more muscle right there. One of the last things we're going to do for bony landmarks is the hands and pasterns. Like I said, it's not the actual term. Now, the forearm muscles appear to be mostly, in general, kind of similar to what we'll see in a primate. So we're going to bring that one. It's not coming around far enough. So we kind of come around here. This particular muscle is for twisting the arm. And this one is for twisting it back. Most of the rest of the muscles are for the fingers, because all the bending is done by the triceps and the biceps. Now, this means that we're only going to be able to do the... let's increase that lazy radius. We're going to do mostly straight lines for these. We're going to smooth them out just a bit. And we're going to kind of pull up this elbow area, because that would be a bony landmark. And smooth it down. And kind of come around under here and smooth that down. Okay, now, yes, the arms are much larger than on most of these other theropods. The next thing is we're going to add some stuff to the tail. And hello! Yes, what I'm doing, I'm basically trying to come up with a way of doing a Tarrasque with a somewhat viable anatomy, using references based on archaeological recreations of theropods and other creatures, especially thanks to my Cyclopedia Anatomicae. Right now, as you can see, I've got a reconstruction of the T-Rex. So it tells us we need to get one of the muscles coming down from here. We need to build that up. And then we're going to smooth it out. A lot of these we're going to go back to in a little bit, because this is the lowest tier of resolution we can work on this critter. The head, for example, is going to wait till the next tier. Now, the tails, what ends up happening with the tail is we have muscles that just kind of, well, the best way to put it is they fish the herringbone above and below the tail. We're going to smooth that out. The end result is that it becomes a little bit wider on the sides. Right about there. And a little bit, let me smooth that out. And a little bit wider on top. A little bit taller on top. Now again, this is something that is going to end up being covered by, or part of it is going to end up being covered by the shell. But we still want the shape there. so we can work on it. Okay, now let's zoom out, and we can see that, well, let me double frame and zoom out so it's centered. Looking at it really small, we can see the basic shape. It's going to be a very muscular armed theropod style beastie. Those feet, like I said, are going to get much bigger. We're going to add toes and fingers. Probably not this tier of resolution, but within the next. Okay, to get to the next tier of resolution, we're simply going to subdivide. And now we've got 4 times the polygons to play with. And this is where we're going to start working on the bone structure for the head. Okay. Now, as you can see, the head is intended to be kind of lantern-jawed like Godzilla 98. So we're going to work on building up. Well, first of all, we're going to shrink it, and we're going to turn that lazy radius down a bit more again, and we're going to build up the muscle around, or not the muscle, but the bony landmark around that jaw. And a bit of smoothing. We can increase the smoothing intensity again because we're at a higher resolution now. Smoothing is more intense the lower resolution you go. That's something to remember. And we're going to use the Alt key to kind of dig in under the chin here. And then smooth it. Just so that we have that, again, that impression, the general vague undercut around the jaw. Now we're going to use the Move tool. We're going to grab the front here and move it out, because no creature has a square jaw. We're going to grab here, move it in, this move out, bring it in. And then we're going to grab down here and move it out because there's going to be tusks. We're going to go back, we're going to go to inflate and set to the sub, and we're going to shrink the size of it a bit. We're going to deflate up in here so we can dig out where the mouth will be. It'll give us more of a shape there. And then we're only going to come around this way because there will be a tongue in here, and that's the best way to do our tongue. Now we're swapping back to add, and we're going to kind of come around here. And then smooth it on top. And back to subtract so we can emphasize the mouth going deep in. And thus we have that. And thus I have a cat that's investigating things. No, little baby girl. Okay. Put you down there. Yep. You're going to stay here, okay? Yeah. Because I need to be working. Thank you. Now, as we can see, I have the front jaw a little bit too long. It's also curving down. So we're going back to move. We're going to make this... Actually, we're going to move topological. Make sure that I'm large, but still not quite within there. And I'm going to grab the bottom and pull it up flat. And back a bit. Grab the bottom here, pull it up. And we're going to grab the front of the head and pull it forward. Now, the jaw is pretty much done. Well, for bony landmarks. I now have to make the bony landmarks for the head. And so we're gonna shrink it and go back to clay buildup and get some soda because my throat's getting dry. One of the best 3D prints I ever made. Now the skull itself, I'm having to do a lot of creative paleontology because what we can see here is that the eye socket actually doesn't have a horizontal cheekbone, but more of a vertical one. Right in here. That. Then it's got a bone under, along the upper jaw, and then a bone coming down to meet the nasal cavity down here. So we're going to try and recreate that, but if we have to, I will go ahead and add in more of a slope forward. So instead of having just this bone down here, there's also going to be one sloping forward, just to give it more of a modern style draconian appearance. Alright, first things first. The back of the eye socket. Then the front of the eye socket. The mouth, or not the mouth, but the other. Just kind of drawing out the diagram of where they are. And then the nasal cavity. And it's just rough drawings here, and then it's gonna be a solid skull here. Except it's not, because we're going to have to build up an area probably around here connected to the right about here. We're going to end up building up the mounting points, so to speak, for the massive forward-facing horns that the Tarrasque has. So we're going to build these up, just kind of build you up. And it's going to meet right on the brow. And we're going to grab the move, shrink this a bit, and just kind of pull them up and out and over. Just to kind of give us our positioning for those horns. And I'm thinking they're a bit too far in. So we're going to pull them out like that. Let's make the whole head a little bit wider. Okay, now the next thing we need to do, because of this is the eye and this is a predator, we need to grab the eye socket and pull it out further. Because the eye needs to be forward facing. We're going to grab this and pull it in. And because we need that eye to be looking forward. Okay, we're going back to play build up. We're going to build up a bit more back here. Now these bones will not actually be visible immediately and identifiably on the final version of the Tarrasque. Okay, these bones will be covered up by muscles on top. Yes, we're going to be overlaying the muscles, but not yet. We're going to smooth out here. Okay. Then we're going to kind of build up the inner eyebrow or inner eye socket area. Okay. That's where the actual eyes will be, is right in here. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the negative buildup to build up where the nostrils are. And smooth it a bit. And then just kind of build around those nostrils. And kind of smooth it just a bit, and kind of use the inflate tool, shrink it a little bit more, and kind of deflate the nostril here, and then smooth it again. Okay, now we need to add in, this needs to go thicker back. So let's go back to our clay buildup, make it a little bit larger. We're going to kind of build up the back of the horn area and kind of blend it down. Okay, as you can see, it's already getting more of a living thing look. Now it's way too, the head is way too wide. So we're going to grab the move brush and make it big. We're going to grab the side here, we're going to bring it in. We want it more saurian, so we need to make it thinner this way, and a little bit thinner that way. Actually, we need to bring the whole thing down like that, and the neck up to support the horns as much as we can. Now we're going back to clay buildup. We're going to build up the space between the horns and assume that there's additional muscling involved right here to support it down the neck, because those horns would be big and heavy. And we do still have our eye sockets. Let's do one more thing for the shape of the head. We're going to grab these jaw corners and bring them in. Okay. Now let's frame out. It's looking a lot more saurian now. We're going to kind of deal with that in just a minute. Let's shrink the move and bring that back just a little bit. Yeah. Now we're going to grab the corner of the jaw and pull it out and pull it down, because we do want that kind of Godzilla look on the jaw. Kind of zoom out. It's already looking a lot more like a living thing than it did the other day. Alright, right in here, I think we really should kind of smooth that area over. That's an area that might build up some fat. Okay. Hi. Okay, excellent. 6 people. I'm going to pop here just for a moment. Mostly because I got a few things to peek at and make sure that things aren't happening. And I don't want them on screen. Okay. Now, as soon as I take my peeks at these, I am going to go ahead and pop back over to YouTube, oh, there we go, the Tarrasque. Alright, now the next thing that we're going to do, because I have done so much work, if you look at the size of the polygons on the thigh, and then you look at the size of the polygons in the horn area of the head, you'll see that the horns, the area the horns are going to be coming out of is really, really low poly. So what we're going to do, first let's move this and kind of pull this in, because the horns are going to be coming out of that. We're going to subdivide it twice. And then we're going to dynamesh it at 400. This keeps us in roughly the same polygon count on most of the body that we had a second ago, but it redistributes the ones on the head so that we have a few more to play with in areas like the eye. But we need to give it one more subdivision to do that. Divide! Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start off using the slash tool. And we're going to use it to draw our basic lines and shapes for where the eyes themselves are. Since the eyes won't be articulated, I don't need to worry about making them a separate ball and making sure that the eye socket fits roto. Don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to draw first, kind of, oh, way too strong, way too large. I forgot to turn off Lazy Mouse. Yeah, there we go. Kind of draw under there, around here, and then kind of come around like that. There we have our actual eye. We're going to start dragging around parts around here to make the eyelid. And to do that, we also need to kind of shrink this by smoothing it. Now we're going to use the move tool, shrink it down. I'm going to kind of bring it down like this to really emphasize that eye. Dragging up to make our eye sockets, our eyelids rather. Okay, and then we're gonna make it a little bit bigger and drag it out like that and kind of push the bottom in, because most upper eyelids tend to be higher up on the eyeball. Then we're going to shrink it, not that much, and we're going to smooth out this part right here. And that. So we have our tiny little eyes, and they are capable of binocular vision, as you can see here, which is what we need for a predator or omnivore. Now the problem is, right now the shape is kind of happy squinting. So what we need to do is we need to bring this up and this down. Okay. Now, we're going to go back to slash. We're going to kind of draw in. Let's make it a little bit bigger, a little bit deeper. I'm going to kind of draw in down here. And then smooth it. Yeah. Anything more with the eyes will happen after the next layer of smoothing. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw out where the little tendony area, the connective tissue area between the upper and lower jaw, right here. We're going to shrink it so we can smooth out where we just drew our and then we're going to do it again. The reason being is because we want to emphasize this part. A lot of details will get exaggerated when we make a miniatures that have them. I've gone into this about when I talk about proportion, especially details like the hands and a human eye. They get exaggerated on miniatures so it's easier to see across a tabletop and easier to paint once you've got the miniature in your hand. Same thing's going to apply to other details on other critters. This thing's eyes are going to be large enough to paint. So we can go ahead and not worry about making them so small, but other details like that. Okay. Now we're going to add in jaw muscles. Because one thing that a Tarrasque would have is nasty, nasty jaw muscles. So we look back at our picture here, and that's not what we want. We want this. This is a diagram of the jaw muscles of most dinosaurs, including down near the bottom, a couple non-dinosaur, chicken and alligator. American alligator, to be exact. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see that the muscles for the jaw on the T-Rex up here go all the way to the top of the head and into the inside of this little depression here. That's this. And that's what we just created down here. That's actually skin covering the muscles that are on humans back here. Our cheeks, those are flaps in front of the jaw muscle. Now, it comes out about a third of the way down and then wraps around the bottom. I don't think we're going to need to worry about that, but there is one that kind of comes down here that we might want to try and take care of. So we're going to go back to the clay buildup tool. We're going to kind of, well, that's a bit too big. We're going to kind of stretch the muscles from here to here. and then we're going to smooth it. Okay. Now let's draw this here. And smooth it out. That's a further bit with those jaw muscles that wrap around the underside of the jaw. Now once again we have a problem with it. Looks like it's smiling. So we're going to get the move tool into place. We're going to grab down here, we're going to move it up and back. And then down. We're also going to kind of pull down a bit there. Definitely has a lot of theropod influences now. Now we can go ahead and add in some additional buildups just to give it a bit more personality. Like this bone right here, and kind of come forward with it to the bone in front of the sinus cavity. And let's draw here. The more detail we can put in here without adding in the scales yet, the better. Because scales are just icing. Okay. And I'm thinking we need to go and smooth that. We're going to smooth out the eye on the next pass. Okay. I don't think we need to do much else for the arms and legs and the back and sides, but the belly needs a good bit. The belly needs to be this. This needs to be our shape. Okay. And let's make this bigger and kind of pull back with little cross-hatched marks for where the belly is. Because it doesn't have the abdominal shape the same way we do. On top of that, it would probably have a stored body fat down here. As large as it was, and with the way the bone structure was set up, yeah. Now we're going to shrink this again. And what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of draw in a couple different sets of serratus type muscles. I say serratus type because I'm not sure that it would be the proper term. And then we're going to make it bigger and smooth out that area. Once again, we just want some of the actual landmarks there. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back in for slash. I'm going to make it bigger and nowhere near as deep. We're going to kind of come in and draw under this muscle. And then from the deltoid under. We're defining our muscles now. Okay. Some of them don't need it as much as others. Okay. Now looking at that, we kind of need to tweak the arm. So we're going to the move tool. Make this big enough to where it's not quite reaching the back. We're going to pull this into there. Down and this up, and then shrink this down, go to inflate, add, reduce it, and just kind of pull up on here. And then smooth it. Okay, that's gonna be pretty good. Frame out. Oh. We have the bulk we need now for the Tarrasque. Most of our basic and anatomical features are defined, except we haven't done the hands, fingers, feet, and toes. Now, if you have any questions at all dealing with what I am doing, ask. I may not immediately get to it, but I will get to it. I mean, right now, there's only been 2 people that have said anything this entire broadcast, and that was just, hi, and wow, this is cool, which, thank you, but if you have questions, if you don't understand why I'm doing something, if you don't tell me that you have questions, I won't be able to help you. Okay, we're going to use the snake hook brush to get our thumb, our pseudo thumb, and our fingers out of the hand. Then we're going to use the move tool to get those back up. I'm going to kind of smooth it a bit. Now these thumbs are kind of useless thumbs. They're not really going to do much. And most of what we're about to do is going to be done with the inflate tool rather than the clay buildup. One thing we are going to do is we're going to go and pop over to clay buildup and make sure that we turn auto masking back face mask on. That's right here under auto masking. This way, when I draw on, it won't suck up the backside. Actually, we're going to start off by drawing on what would be the tendons and the size of the bone. We're going to have to do some dynameshing here in a little bit, simply because this the geometry of these fingers and hands is getting a bit rough because I pulled out those fingers so long. Okay. Inflate. I'm going to inflate the fingers from underneath mostly to kind of And make them a little bit thicker, especially down there where they meet. A little bit smoother. And we're going to smooth out where we just did a whole lot of that. Okay, and then here, and then we're going to kind of inflate underneath the fingers with that, and then under here we're going to kind of pull out some. Then we're going to kind of deflate it here. This way they can technically grab, just wrapping their fingers around something, but it won't be as... Okay, now we're going to kind of swell out where the knuckles would be and smooth it. Okay, now let's frame out all the way. And I'm thinking we might want to make these hands bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to move, make this a lot bigger. We're going to grab the side, and we're going to pull it forward. The reason for this is because I'm going to make it wider more than... I kind of pull it back and pull it forward. And then we're going to shrink this and kind of pull the fingers out a little bit, like a little bit curved. I'm going to make the middle finger a little bit more. Yeah, shrink these. I'm gonna... Oh. Okay, now frame out. We're going to start working on the toes and feet next. Well, thank you, Flavored Pickle. You know, my sister-in-law loves pickles. To the point where they're almost a running gag. But yeah, I myself I'm not a fan of pickles, but hey, more power to her. Alright, now let's build up the bottom of where the three toes are going to be. We're going to give it a three-toed foot. And we're going to start off by building up this geo down here, but with the clay build-up brush. This is where the toes are going to emerge from. It's going to be a big old broad flat foot. We want the inner toe to be the biggest one, so we need to kind of pull it forward a bit more with this brush and kind of give it more of a large bony structure coming up the side of the back of the foot. The side of the inside of the instep. There we go. Instep. Okay, then we're going to kind of pull this down. Another large bony structure. These are not tendons. These are the actual bones on the inside of the foot. There are tendons there, but there's actually bone there too. So We're going to kind of smooth out under here. To be exact, we're going to go ahead and use the inflate negative. Pull back that section. And then with clay buildup, we're going to kind of pull them down this way too. And just kind of smooth it out. One thing to note when you're working on anything like this where you're practically coming at it from scratch. This is not going to be sculpted on the way the usual, you know, I have the human figure in the pose I want, I'm going to make him into my character. Instead, you want to make sure that you're starting everything from the lowest polygon count version you can, which in this case was the rebuilt raw geometry. Okay, now we also need to kind of build up this bone. We're back on bony landmarks because we're working in an area that we hadn't messed with before. This is like an anchor right here. So we're going to make sure that we keep it as a body shape on this thing. And then we're going to add in the ankles. The ankles are what some people call the second knee of the pastern. I'm going to add in here. Okay, now what we're going to do, zoom out. I need to subdivide we're going to Dynamesh at 512, a little bit higher. And then we're going to zoom in, and you can see, oh no, that wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted Dynamesh now at 1024. Okay, good. Now the next thing that we're going to do, we're going to grab these toes. And we're going to move them out. And then we're going to use the inflate tool, shrink that down. Oh, that's good. And we're going to build up first, well, the pads underneath those toes. Let's smooth that. And then the fact that those toes are mostly claw. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to draw on basically just like on top of the claws here and here. Then, with the slash tool, we're going to kind of draw in to make our toesies into clawsies. Okay, that's pretty good. Now we're going to do it from underneath. We're only going to do it once because it's not as in depth. And then we're going to come around here. Okay. Now, with the move tool, we're going to grab the top of these claws and pull them up, and the bottoms and pull them down, and then smooth it. Just kind of redefine the shape that we need for these claws. More impressive, more hooked. Yeah. Okay, and then now the innermost claw. And if we look at those feet, those are some pretty impressive heavy-duty feet. Now we need to detail the hands. And then we're going to go back in and refine the eyes and the inner mouth as well. And then we're going to take it back into 3D Studio Max to add in the horns and the teeth. No, before we do that, we're going to build the shell. Now what we're going to do here, we're going to use inflate primarily. First we're going to redraw kind of these tendons here. And I'm going to kind of inflate up above here. And we're also going to kind of inflate down here. And just a little bit below the same spots. And kind of, well, no. Shrink it down and connect the tendons with on the top of the hands. And then we're going to use the move tool grab the bottom of these and pull them into talons. And then we're going to grab this, pull it into talon, then go back to inflate. We're going to inflate the whole area at the base and build it into more of the thicker claws that we know that this guy has, because those are a little bit thin. Framing out before we sharpen the claws. Okay, I'm thinking this underside of the bicep is looking a little too harsh. I'm going to zoom in and smooth out that part of the bicep. followed by 1, 2. There. That's much better. Frame out. Now I'm thinking it's too much of a pinch here. So we're going to grab the move brush again. We're going to make it bigger. We're going to grab that part right there and pull it out and up a little. We're also going to kind of extend it forward and back a little bit more. And there we have the basic body for our Tarrasque, but now we need to refine the shape of the eye. Okay, we're gonna pull this. And then we're going to smooth out around here. Shrink it even more. We're going to smooth out the eye itself. Okay, frame. Like I said, we still have our binocular vision. We have everything in place to send this back to 3D Studio Max. I can do the shell later. Oh, wrong button. Okay, so does anybody have any questions on what I've been doing and what I have done so far? Anyone? I mean, I got 4 people watching. I'm sure someone's got questions. Okay. I guess not. Well, I guess what we're going to do is we're going to go back into here. Now, right now we're looking at 661,000 triangles. That's not too bad. But it's too few for making the gotta smooth in here a little bit. It's too many for making the various body parts. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click duplicate. This gives us a second version of it down here. That's selected. C plugin. And I'm going to make a decimation master. I'm going to make a 20,000 polygon version. Click. And this is going to be exported to 3D Studio Max for the sole purpose of having geometry to work from to make the horns and the teeth. Now, wait a minute. It doesn't look like much changed until we do this. I mean, this is what it's at right now in the actual figure. And this is where this decimated version with 39,996 triangles is at. Well, we're going to export this Geo 1.1. Once again, working with iterated geometry. What that means is we're working with it as if, you know, we're updating the numbers as we work on it. Now, I'm going to open up 3D Studio Max. Well, wait a minute, I already had it open. File, import. And then we're going to import from Tarrasque, Sculpt, Rod 011. Import. And we're going to get object color, uncheck show frozen in gray, and we're going to freeze it. So this way I don't actually select it when I'm working on anything else. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we need the horns. So we're going to go up here. Let's just to show what it looks like. We're going to start our horns in here, in one side. We're going to tweak them until it fits. And then we're going to give it shape this way. Almost hook-like. Now we got to move this one here because we're going to have to move the whole thing forward. So we're going to start with a cone. From here to there. Forward quite a bit and down. Zoom it forward until it's there. And now one thing we're going to do is first we need to make it longer. So we need to make the height. It needs to go past the edge of the actual Tarrasque's head. We're going to reduce the segments to 1 for now while we're working on it. Cap segments to 2. Sides to 10. The reason we did all that, double poly, select weld. It's now one vertex. We're going to slide it off to the side because it's going to be kind of coming off. Yeah. Now, we are going to wireframe. We're going to use these vertexes. We're going to bring them all to within about the same distance of the edge of the socket. So that this way it'll fill it. Now the next thing that we do, we select all of these edges and we connect them in. Cancel? No, I don't want to connect them. And then convert it to vertexes and we push. This, because we want it a little bit thicker there. Collapse all. We also want to bring it up a little bit so it's coming from here and then goes back down. And let's actually move this down even more and a little bit in. Okay. Now if we go ahead and select that back edge loop and chamfer it so it doesn't subdivide on us. Then we mesh smooth it once, twice. We have the basic shape for our horns. However, let's drop that mesh smooth because there's one thing we need to do first. We need to add in one other back about here. And then we need to select that vertex and relax it a little. There we go. So now we can mesh smooth it. 1, 2. Collapse all. Then we're going to move its pivot to 0 on the x-axis. And mirror it. And copy. Okay. Then we go over to here, we're going to reset the transform, because when you mirror something, you're not actually making a mirror image and from the ground up. What it's doing is it's creating a copy that's scaled negative in the X, or whatever mirror. Instead of being here, it's here. So if the back of my hand was the outside of the model, the outside's now the inside, and we have to flip that. And it's looking more and more like a Tarrasque with those two big old horns there. Okay. Now, that's part 1 of what we need to take back into ZBrush. Part 2 is teethies. Let's go and just make things that, let's attach those. Okay, now, there are 2 teeth that we're going to have separate from the rest, and that's kind of tusk-like ones coming off from the side here. Unlike, you'd think that we'd be using cones for the teeth, but we're not. We're actually going to use spheres. Okay, that might be a little bit too big for this. Yeah, that is. Let's reduce the radius a little bit. Yeah. And now what we're going to do is we're going to convert it to an edible poly. We're going to select these and pull them down. And then select these, pull it up here. And into there. Actually, let's go ahead and select these and move them a bit more. Then we're going to rotate the whole thing so that they're angled in towards the mouth, like that. Yeah. Now, just to make sure that these bottom of that tooth is going into the mouth, we're pulling it down even more. Now when we mesh smooth this tusk is nice and thick and tusk-like, but we need to make a little bit, let's make it a little bit thicker. We're going to push until it's about there. And one of the ways we can modify this, we can now grab that and pull it up. Grab these and move them down. And then shrink them. There we go. And let's unpush a little bit. There. Collapse all. And that's our tusk. But now we need to make the rest of the teeth. Yes, the main reason I'm doing this is a lot of the modeling tutorials that you will see are aimed at animation and posing. While there will be posing involved in what I am doing, the eyes will never be posed. They will always be set where they are because the eyes won't have a pupil or iris until you paint a printed version. The articulation, joints, a lot of people will have it so that they will be posing as they sculpt. We are not. We are posing into a Saurian equivalent of an A pose. In another episode upcoming later this week or possibly week after, I'm going to be rigging it in another program, a program called DAZ Studio. And at that point, I will be chopping up the body parts as appropriate for movement. Then I'll be doing a detail pass, which for most of you, you're going to have to do it a different way than I do it, and I can't really explain why right now. I'll get into it then, but you can do it as what's called a displacement map. You give it a texture map, and then you paint on your details like your scales, and you can push them out after you pose the figure. We'll get to it. Yeah, this is more of an A pose, simply because if you notice the angle of the arms especially is more of an A. Since the legs rarely move too much side to side, we can get away with a mostly underbody pose for them. The most concern I have right now is the pastern. I know it's not a pastern. It's the metatarsals of the foot, but it's easier to say pastern. Anyway, I'm going to make the individual teeth here and then mirror the whole thing. But what we're going to do with these teeth is we're going to use circles to make them. Or spheres. Okay. And it's gonna be kind of, yeah. We're gonna start off with pretty much most of them having the same size. After we've got them in position, we're gonna tweak the size and maybe a little bit of orientation. Okay. Now we need to kind of pull this here. And this is going to be up against the tusk. And now I'm going to use a hold down shift and drag. And it's going to make a copy. Actually, I'm going to pull this back over that way because I'm going to end up shrinking those two. And this one right here. No. We're going to rotate them ever so slightly that way. Some of them a bit more than others. Okay. See, a lot of people who do 3D modeling tutorials are aiming them at things that are going to be animated, like game models or character models in film or commercial or movies. We're not. We're aiming them. They're going to be sculpted into a static pose, and as such, they don't need to be as articulated, so to speak, as the ones that we were just discussing. And then one more tooth back that way, and let's make it smaller. Okay, so now we're going to grab this tooth. We're going to grab this tooth. We're going to attach all the other teeth. We're then going to mesh smooth them. And attach the tusk. Then we go up here and we're going to change the center from -1.56 on the X to 0 on the X and mirror it. Alright, wrong going to go here and mirror it. And those are going to be reset selected and normal. So now we look at it, and those teeth are pretty rough looking. I wouldn't want to get bit. Now we need to make teeth for the upper jaw. We're going to do it pretty much the same way. And while we're doing all this, I can take this out of my lap, and it's not so comfortable when it's in there. Yeah. Anyway. It's 9:54. So now, let's zoom out here, and let's come up here. We're going to start at the front and center. We're going to make a sphere we're going to make the teeth on top a little bit narrower, but a little bit longer. So it's actually going to have more teeth up top. Alright, so let's bring this up to there. Editable poly. Gonna drag down to there, and this one drag down to here. Okay. Now we're going to drag it around and fill in positions. Let's look underneath to make sure that we're getting these, again, in the right spot. Since this is for sculpting, for printing miniatures, we can get away with a lot. For one, we don't have to worry about texture mapping. Now, if you are going, there will be some worry about texturing for those who don't have what I've got. And what I've got, I can't give. I can't sell. I can't do anything with because it doesn't belong to me. It's an add-on in DAZ Studio to create what are called ultra high definition morphs. I can morph a subdivided version of the figure. And you might see these called blend shapes in other programs. For the purposes of what we're doing, it's the same thing. It's a list of what you can do to the vertexes to move them, to give them a higher information and further detail, to change the overall shape and mass. And what this will end up doing for us is it will end up, I'll be making the scales with this. Okay, I'm going to pull it back over here. We're going to go up a little. Back over here. Back down. And then up over here. Back up. Because we're just playing with the length of the teeth now. The last thing I'm going to do before I call it a night, after I bring these into ZBrush, is I'm going to make the shell. And I'm willing to bet any of my longtime viewers can guess how I'm going to make the shell. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call that there. Let's go ahead and attach all of these other top teeth. We're going to mesh smooth it twice. 1, 2. We're going to push, make them a little bit, just a little bit larger. In fact, yeah, let's go ahead and select these. Well, first of all, let's attach that. We're going to select these and then invert. And we're going to push the teeth to be a little bit thicker, a little bit closer to each other. Collapse all. Okay. Now here, we're going to go back up here, effect pivot only, X of 0, and then we're going to mirror it. Reset selected, normal, collapse all. And here we have the horns and teeth. It still really has a nice saurian theropod look. We're going to load these in at the same time. So, File, Export selected, Wavefront OBJ, and then we're going to export it into Meshes, Meshes, Tarrasque, Sculpt, Horn Bits 1.0, export, done. Now we go back in here, and here is our fully detailed version. We are going to append Polymesh 3D, and then we're going to import the horn bit. And it really looks good. I really like how it's turning out. Okay, actually it's 10 o'clock now. I normally only do a 2-hour show. This would be the end of it, but you can see how far we've gotten. What I'm going to do is I'm going to append another one. Import Raggio 1.0. And then we're going to come over here to deformation, offset, and we're going to slide it over. I'm going to slide it back a little too, just so I can show how far we came tonight. On the left here is the geometry I started with tonight, and on the right is what I've done to it so far. We've added in bony landmarks, such as in the tops of the hip bones and shoulder blades, the bone structure around the eye socket and around the nostrils, muscular landmarks, and we've pulled out the toes and the fingers. Then we went in and we made the horns and the teeth. So, this is what we've gotten. If you didn't catch it at the beginning, this is going to be the Tarrasque from D&D. Okay. Now, to go from here, I'm going to save out a Z tool. Raggio 1.2 Z tool. Save. You always want to save out iterated project files if you can. When I do my human figure sculpts, because I'm doing them in less than 2 hours, I don't bother with that. But I still have the base geometry that I sculpted on, the body, the clothing bits, the props, the base. And then I have the refined final detailed version. If need be, I can reload in some of those older bits and kind of overlap and override what I've done on But with this, we need a bit more iteration in the saves. Now what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to render best. And it's rendering with GI shadows. I'm going to wait till it's done, and I'm going to take a screenshot with print screen. Okay. I'm going to start up Photoshop, and I'm just going to make a record of that. Well, Chad, one thing that I did was, before I even started this channel, I made my own custom geometry male figure and rigged it so that I could pose it in whatever pose I needed. I then later on went back in and made blend shapes to make different races, like dwarf, elf, orc, that sort of thing. So for all intents and purposes, these two guys started off as the same base geometry. Let me go ahead and get it a little bit closer. And where's the camera control? I don't like autofocus because it hiccups so bad, but I can manually focus. Both of these figures started off as the same basic raw male geometry. And this one is now an orc bowman, and this one is now a Viking warrior. It certainly does, Chad. In fact, it's very similar to something that a lot of older miniature companies back in the days when everyone did it in, everyone was using Kneadetite to make their figures. Yes, I still have a boatload of this stuff. Companies would have armatures that were standardized throughout their range, so that every human started with the same basic metal armature, and you would bend it into the pose you wanted and then build up the putty. It's the same thing here. I've got my standardized basic human figure, which has a standard orc shape, a standard dwarf shape, a standard ogre shape. And then from those I can sculpt. I can pose the figure and sculpt from that. I'm gonna post the picture of what I've gotten done tonight into the Discord after we've done. Now, we have a few new people in watching, so I'd like to ask, is there anything that you would like to ask about what I'm doing? In general, about this specific project, anything? Yeah. But basically, the entire purpose of this channel is to help people learn how to do their own tabletop miniatures. Yes, my Patreon does have my base human figure and male and female, basic clothing, basic blend shapes, basic props. But I personally think it would be better if everyone learned to make their own base human figure. The problem is, that is a major, major project. I can give recommendations on where to find tutorials to do this. In fact, the most legendary one of them all is ideal for this, and it's called the Joan of Arc tutorial. It's originally for, I believe, Maya, maybe Blender, but I've seen it translated to all sorts of different programs because there's really no difference except for the name of the tool and where to find it. They've all got the same tools needed. Maya, which is not free. 3D Studio Max, not free. Blender, free, but can be a little confusing at times because it's got an unusual user interface. As for the sculpting, if you don't got $900 to drop on the full version of 3D ZBrush, like I did about 10 years ago, then $180 for Core, or free for Sculptress or Blender sculpting. And again, there's quite a few tutorials out there for sculpting in both Sculptress and Blender. The big advantage I have with ZBrush, every single update since when I bought it at like 3.0 has been free. It's been 12 years since I got ZBrush. Every update, incremental update and full version, has been free. It's just the way Pixelogic does things. Also, if you're planning on sculpting, I heavily, heavily recommend you get yourself a graphics tablet. You know, this kind. Not this kind. This. And explicitly, I recommend Wacom. They are the name. They are the name in these kind of tablets. And the main reason I recommend them is because they've got the customer service and the product quality to back it up. Okay. That's a very good point, Chad. I started with a program called Rhino 3D. They had a free beta, and it's not polygons. It's what are called NURBs. And each surface, instead of being defined by, triangles and quads, is defined by a formula. It's a warped plane that you chop up and recombine, and then you convert to polygons at the end. I then moved to 3D Studio Max in about 2002. So I've been working on Max for 16 years. I haven't updated in 8 years, simply because 3D Studio Max has, instead of having it where I could buy it every few years for $3,000, it's now on a subscription package, and it costs a lot. It costs more than my car. So yeah. If you don't have previous experience on other programs, like, okay, Bend is a modifier. Well, this program might say it's a world space modifier. Others might say it's an object modifier. Others might say it, there's any number of places that they used to put things in Blender. They may have, gotten a commonality recently. I haven't used it since 2008, maybe 2009, about 10 years ago. Anyway, Blender can pretty much do everything. I don't know how their sculpting handles extreme high poly counts. I think the highest I saw the Tarrasque tonight was barely over 1 million polygons. But ZBrush can handle over 20 million easy. And it's just, when you're working on something like the Tarrasque from scratch, from very oversimplified geometry, you want to start off as low as you can go and do your basic forms and shapes there. Then you go up a level of resolution and you start doing some of the more detailed bits. And then you go up another level of resolution. Now what's going to happen on Thursday is, number one, I'm going to be making the shell with its spikes. Then number two, I'm going to be doing a rather easy peasy cheesy squeezy retopologizing to bring it down to, bring it down to maybe 100,000 polygons or so, and then chop it up and start the rigging. Okay, that's understandable, Pickle. In this case with the Tarrasque, because I wanted that nice smooth flow for the whole skin, you know, when I get into doing what I'm about to do, because after I rig it, then I'm going to be making the scales and the detailing on, like, the surface details on the neck, like what you'll see on... basically, I'll have one layer doing things like the wrinkly bits that you'll see on, like, a Komodo dragon, and another layer doing the general scale pattern, and then it'll combine. And I'll load that back into DAZ Studio as a dial. I can turn on or off the detail. Then I'll be able to pose the Tarrasque, load up that detail, send it back to ZBrush, and refine it for printing. Okay. The reason I promote Wacom, I'm not sponsored by them in any way, shape, or form. Right now my only sponsor is Anycubic for the Anycubic Photon. And the sheer quality of prints I get off that machine, oh my god. But Wacom, I had an Intuos 3. Intuos 3. I got it about a year before the Intuos 4 came out. Not this past summer, but the summer before. It died. It died hard. It was 9 years old. And I was like, yeah, it lasted me a good long time. Salute to a fallen soldier. I sent a message to Wacom saying, yeah, this thing lasted me 9 years. I'm impressed. Thanks. And they contacted me back, and I spent a couple hours working with Wacom tech support to get a 9-year-old unsupported tablet working again. And when we isolated what the problem was, they actually had someone go into their warehouse and search to try to find the part that would get it working again. They couldn't, but they tried. And that impressed me. They could have just said, after I sent them that message saying, hey, thanks, they could have said, you're welcome. But instead they tried to help me get it working again. That's something that a lot of companies just wouldn't do. Okay, I've never had a problem with the drivers. Once in a blue moon, I would start up ZBrush and it would say the tablet wasn't found. And all I would have to do is go into Task Manager, go to Processes, stop the Wacom process and restart it. And it works. So I've never had the driver problem. Oh, and another 3D print that is still I use consistently. This is my stylus holder. It's a Green Lantern power battery in some rubble. And you place the stylus where you'd stick the ring. Gotta love it. And this is in the way. There we go. Oh, and yes, my most common filament when I use an FDM print, fused deposition modeling, is Deep Green by Ziltech. Ziltech is awesome stuff. This is what remains of one spool. Now, this spool, this filament, is PLA. And it's well over a year, very close to a year and a half old. I live in a humid environment. This is a $13 spool of filament. I can bend it almost double. And it's not snapping. Find some PLA that can do that. That's not 40 bucks a spool. You know? It's $13.99 for a 1 kilogram spool of PLA. They've got all sorts of colors. They don't have some colors. They don't have a brown. They don't have a gray. But they've got some really nice colors, some really pretty ones. This was printed in their deep blue. But yeah, I live in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis has 5 rivers running through the city limits. The Mississippi, our city limits extend slightly into the Mississippi, where Mud Island and President's Island are. The Wolf River, the Hatchie, and the Loosahatchee, and I can't remember the 5th river's name. I know we also have a large creek that's as big as what some people call rivers. It's as big as the Rio Grande at El Paso, called Nancana Creek. But 5 rivers, one of them being the largest in the northern hemisphere. And in that level of humidity, that PLA, a year and a half old, was bending like that. Yeah. And in case you haven't seen, this is a perfect example of why any cubic photon is indispensable to me for making miniatures. Let me go ahead and pop open the webcam controls again so I can adjust the focus. This. Can you imagine printing this? An icon for the Cloud of Daggers spell on an FDM printer. This is why I like my photon. That and the sheer detail you can get out of it. Oh yeah. Flaming sphere. Oh. Meanwhile, it is 10:20. I am going to go ahead. I'm going to well, first, hey, Fuzzball, come on. Yeah, you. Oh, she wants to investigate my trash can. No, anyway. Oh. Meatball on a stick. Anyway, like I said, it's 10:22. Now, what I do at the end of each show, in order to make sure I don't shut down the show before the lag has caught up, I hold up my hand and I go from 5 to 1. When I get to 1, I say something goofy and log out. Okay, so we're going to start with 5, 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1. One of the best plays I was ever a performer in was titled Dancing Cannibal Poodles on a Stick. Good night.